I'm Gail Mello. I'm president of LaGuardia Community College, and welcome. Thank you. Welcome to LaGuardia. You can't give a college president a mic, I'm sorry, Attorney General, without the 1-minute advertisement. So you should know that LaGuardia Community College serves 60,000 people every year here in the most extraordinary county of Queens, that we train people for all of the areas of society that I think the Attorney General wants to make sure are safe and fair and effective in healthcare, in law, in medicine. There's a lot of things that happen here at LaGuardia. We invite you back anytime. Okay, that's my 1 minute. It is pretty exciting today that the Attorney General, Eric Schneiderman, wanted to come and hold his forum here with us. And we are honored and delighted. We know that the Attorney General, like our college, I think, has maybe the same motto, Attorney General. Our motto is dare to do more. You like it? It sort of fits, I think. He's the highest ranking legal official, law enforcement official in our state. And he's really worked tirelessly, I think, to really restore the public's faith in both the public and the private sector through his fierce integrity, his intellectual acumen, and his absolutely extraordinary energy. He's a leader and a reformer, and he has tackled issues. I won't tell you the issues, that's sort of biased, but there are issues that are so dear to my heart that he has taken on and made an extraordinary difference. You don't get to be the Attorney General without being a pretty amazing man, and I think there are some folks here who will introduce him to you. I get to introduce some other very, very extraordinary people, our elected officials. If you will stand as I call your name. We have with us tonight Senator Gineris, Senator Adabo, Senator Stavisky, my own Assemblywoman Kathy Nolan, Assemblywoman Simotas. I'll save my council member in a minute. I'm Council Member-elect Constantides and Borough President-elect Katz. Yeah. Woo! So in order to introduce our esteemed Attorney General, I want to introduce my Assemblyman, who's Jimmy Van Bramer. Jimmy Van Bramer is a leader and a fighter in his own right. Jimmy has stood shoulder to shoulder with us on big issues and small, whether it's domestic violence or street issues, street traffic issues. Councilmember Van Bramer has been pretty extraordinary in terms of his support of LaGuardia. He also helps us fund LaGuardia, so that's really important to me, as do all of the elected. So let me introduce to you my Assembly Member, Jimmy Van Bramer.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening. And welcome to our great Attorney General, Eric Schneiderman, who is a progressive leader for the state, and he has been a progressive leader for so very long. First of all, can I be the first to officially congratulate him for the $13 billion settlement with JPMorgan Chase. The largest settlement with a single entity in the history of the United States, which is a very, very significant accomplishment. So thank you, Attorney General Schneiderman. I've known Attorney General Schneiderman since 1997. I don't know if he remembers the exact first meeting, but I remember it because he made such an impression with me. We were helping our friend, Assemblywoman Deborah Glick, in 1997 on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, before Eric Schneiderman had been elected to office. And he was so dynamic on the corner there in front of one of those supermarkets, Mr. Attorney General, on behalf of Assemblywoman Glick. And then we got to know each other even better on a campaign called Clean Money, Clean Elections, where I worked in 1998 as the deputy field director under the brilliant Valerie Berlin. And Attorney General Schneiderman was on the board of Citizen Action and was very instrumental in that effort to make sure that we took money out of politics and cleaned up the system. And so since then, I've been a big supporter of his and was very, very proud to support him 3 years ago. And he has done an amazing job. And it's so thrilling that your Queens Community Forum, Mr. Attorney General, would be here in my council district. So thank you so much for being here and bringing your amazing team to help support us in everything we attempt to do here in Western Queens. And I want to thank Gail Mello, who promoted me to Assemblyman, but my job is to introduce the actual Assembly person for our district. I have represented Western Queens for 4 years. I just got re-elected a few weeks ago with 100% of the vote, I would like to add. 100% of the vote. So, representing our area for quite some time and joining with me and Senator Gianaris as an amazing team representing Long Island City and LaGuardia Community College, and I'm thrilled it will be joined by our amazing friend, the incoming borough president, Melinda Katz, who's going to do amazing things with me and with us for LaGuardia Community College. But Assemblywoman Nolan is the dean of the Assembly delegation here in Queens and really a leader for decades on so many issues that we care about. She loves LaGuardia Community College, as do I, and as a champion, as the chair of the Education Committee, obviously, and before that, Labor and Banks. She's done so much for the people of Western Queens, but also the people of the state of New York, particularly our young people. So I give you our great Assemblywoman, the great Kathy Nolan.
Thank you, Jimmy. I consider actually the council, I think, is now a promotion from the Assembly, Jimmy, so thank you for putting it that way. I first am really grateful to LaGuardia, as I have always been for all the years that I've represented Long Island City, for leadership and for community. And I want to thank Gail Mello for those qualities. The leadership that Gail brings individually, the leadership that her team brings, and then the sense of community that we have here at LaGuardia, a forum, a chance to share information, a chance for people to keep learning in their careers, to better their families, to make a difference in their world. That's what LaGuardia is about, and so it's been my privilege to be part of this team, as our wonderful councilman said, and Jimmy has been so dynamic and so achieving. It's making me work a little harder here because I know how much he's brought home to LaGuardia. So I'm very proud of that, Jimmy, and proud of you, and he deserves another round of applause, as does Gail Mello. And I want our Attorney General to know that he's been very gracious. You know, a lot of politicians, when they come into LaGuardia, they only want to talk. But Eric was nice. He let us all give him some words of welcome. So I'm going to be brief, and I talk very fast anyway, so I can squeeze a lot in. First, I see in the audience, I see Deidre Ferrick, our district leader. I see Kate Brennan and Dorothy Moorhead, Community Board 2. Dorothy, I see Ernie Brooks from CEC 30. So there, and I'm sure there's at least 10, 15 other people that have a title, and I'm sorry if I didn't see you, my friend John Sabini, former state senator. So Eric, you brought a lot of people in that have a lot to say and a lot of knowledge, and they're going to keep those bureau chiefs hopping because they are the people that make it happen for us here in Western Queens. So it's a great night. Eric has had a lot of accomplishments, really in a relatively short period of time. This is his first forum like this in the city, and I want to thank Mayor Marty Mack for that, Eric. I think he took that upstate philosophy and brought it down home to the city, and I appreciate that. A good friend for many years. So we're in for a treat. We have a dynamic, exciting Attorney General with a lot of accomplishments, a smart guy, a hard worker. He should be from Queens. So, and it's my pleasure to introduce another smart guy. I think just as smart too, Eric. I want to say that. Just as smart and just as hardworking, our State Senator Mike Gianaris. Come on, Mike.
Thank you, Kathy Nolan, and thank you for participating in this relay race of introductions. I'm proud to have the last leg and get you introduce the guest of honor here tonight and the person we're all here to see. I do want to thank Jimmy Van Bramer and Kathy Nolan. They are a great team representing this community, and we all have the great privilege of representing the school run by Gail Mello, who does such a terrific job here at LaGuardia. I have known the Attorney General for more than a decade. I served in the Assembly while he was in the Senate, and we did a lot of good work together. His legacy in the state legislature is well known. He's a leading reformer in his time there and fought for everyday people against powerful interests, and I think most notably the MTA during his time in the Senate. Yes, let's hear it for battling the MTA. And he also has played an instrumental role in my career because he was good enough to encourage and support me when I ran for the Senate from the Assembly. So I would not be here as the senator without Eric Schneiderman's encouragement, so I thank him for that on a personal level. As Attorney General, in only his first term, he has made a national name for himself. You've seen him on the news the last few weeks. You've heard the other speakers mention his tremendous work on the mortgage fraud issue. The president appointed him to chair this commission some time ago, and he rolled up his sleeves and went to work like we know he goes to work, and he achieved the largest settlement in the United States with JPMorgan, and I believe that's not going to be the last we hear of this issue, and I'm sure he'll speak to that in his comments. But it's not only the high-profile issues he's working on. He continues to be a leading advocate for public financing of campaigns and other important structural reforms that need to make our government better, as well as standing up for workers throughout this state. And some of his achievements enforcing the labor laws in New York have been incredibly noteworthy, and we thank him not just for the things that we see him on CNBC about, but also the things that we know affect us on the streets of New York, and yes, upstate as well as in the city. He is someone who has a long future ahead of him. Kathy said she didn't mention where I went to school because she didn't want to put him on the spot, but we actually went to the same school. We're both graduates of Harvard Law School, which I don't know if that talks about how smart we are or how not so smart we are, but in any event, it's a privilege to have gotten to know him and a great honor to have the opportunity to introduce him to you today. So please help me welcome the 65th Attorney General of the state of New York, Eric Schneiderman.
Thank you, Michael, for that great introduction, and thanks to all of you here. It's an honor to be here. Michael is one of the true progressive leaders in the Senate, and it's always a pleasure to be introduced by someone who was also foolish enough to pass up all the money-making potentials of a Harvard Law degree to do what we do. And I thank you for your leadership. The other folks who have spoken, Dr. Gail Mello, incredible accomplishments here over the last number of decades. This is just one of the great institutions of our city. And as was noted, this is the first time we've done a forum like this in New York City, and we wanted to do it here. And the idea is that this is really not about me speaking. I'm going to speak for a while, but it's really to introduce some of my division heads and bureau chiefs, because the way I like my office to operate is for people to understand how user-friendly the Attorney General's office is and how much more easy we want to make it to deal with us. The folks who represent you, you have an incredibly strong team. I want to thank Kathy Nolan and Jimmy Van Bramer for those great introductions. We've known each other for a very long time, worked on a lot of good progressive causes together. Joe Adabo, Toby Stavisky, your new, other people who have been introduced, and a couple of newcomers, or not newcomers. Melinda Katz, I can't call a newcomer, but tremendous, really, I have to say, I can't imagine a better career to experience, background, and skills to prepare someone to be a borough president. So it's a great pleasure, and we look forward to working with all of you in Queens for many, many years to come. I am honored to be your Attorney General. I don't take it for granted, and I will tell you this, what I learned very quickly when I became Attorney General was, I have 30 bureaus. We have 13 offices around the state. And when I became the Attorney General, I think of myself as a pretty good lawyer. But there was a lot I didn't know. And the most important skill in a job like this is having the wisdom to be able to admit what you don't know. And the people who we brought with us tonight, who are going to speak with you, are people who know about all these areas of law in much more detail than I ever could. We're going to talk to you a little bit about what some of our bureaus do and what some of our divisions do. I'm joined tonight by a few of my bureau chiefs, by Executive Deputy Attorney General for Social Justice, Alvin Bragg, by my Executive Deputy who referred to as the mayor, who is kind of like the mayor in the office as well, who coordinates all of our regional offices, Marty Mack. And then three of our great bureau chiefs, Kristen Clark from Civil Rights, Lem Sralovic from Environmental Protection, and Lisa Landau from Healthcare. So just to lay the foundation for this, I want to tell you a little bit about myself. I had a diverse career before I went to law school. I was in and out of school for a while. I actually lived in China at some point. I spent 2 years as a deputy sheriff in a prison in Western Massachusetts, and then I went to law school and came back and tried to go straight. I was a law clerk in the Federal District Court in the Southern District, and I was a lawyer and then became a partner in a big corporate law firm, and was doing fine. And then the money-making phase of my career ended when they made me the pro bono partner of the law firm, and that means public interest law work. And I quickly realized how much more interesting public interest legal work was than my regular billable clients. Not that there's anything wrong with regular billable clients. It's, they're paying for my daughter's college education right now. But I had a real passion for being a public interest lawyer. And as was noted, I ended up getting injunctions against the MTA from raising subway fares. I had a program where we were using 19th century New York State law to evict crack dealers. And I enjoyed it so much, I decided I needed to do that as a full-time career. So I went into the New York State Senate, and then in 2010, I was fortunate enough to be elected as your Attorney General. I care a lot about the law. I'm a real true believer in the American system of justice, and I'm committed to making sure that in New York State, we honor that great American tradition. When I became the Attorney General, I set 3 goals for the office. The first is to have the best public law firm in the country, and I take that very seriously. When I was in private practice, I was trained by folks who were very, very tough. There was one partner when I was young who used to make us put our hands on briefs and swear there was not a mistake anywhere in the document, and then took great joy in looking through trying to find a typo. But I do not think that the people of the state of New York are entitled to any less representation, poorer representation than any of the big corporations that we go against. The people of the state of New York are the most important clients I could possibly have, and I intend to maintain the highest standards. We have done very well already. As you'll see from the team we've assembled, we have got a great crew of lawyers. I'm honored by the people who want to work for me, and we're going to show you through our work and through our results what you can do when you have a great team of lawyers motivated to work on behalf of the public. Now, my second goal, I really want to emphasize for you because it's a little counterintuitive. I realized as I was learning about the office that in addition to all of our work defending the state and our work in our affirmative litigation bureaus, we have a lot of regulatory functions. We regulate healthcare, we regulate securities filings, real estate transactions, and the entire nonprofit sector. We are the regulator in New York for all the charities in the state. And it became clear to me, and also it's true in some of our affirmative bureaus, it's important for us to send a message in the office that we're not just about catching bad guys. Ah, tiempo dominicano, huh? Senator Jose Peralta. A good friend. It's important for us to send the message that we also have to be concerned about making New York as competitive as it can be in the global economy. This is not inconsistent with all our work for equal justice. It is essential that folks who are doing the people's work understand that you get points for helping the good guys as well as points for catching the bad guys. And I will tell you this, in every sector, and I've made a real effort to engage in every sector of the business community, from construction to the hospitality industry to fashion to finance, the good actors in every sector are our best source of information about the bad actors. And it is in all of our interests to see that the good actors succeed. The problem we face in this state is that they're just, overwhelming majority of folks want to play by the rules and run their businesses and live their lives. The small minority who don't seek an unfair competitive advantage over the good actors. So I make clear to our lawyers in our office, it's great if you've caught a bad guy, but you also can come in and say, look, I've helped these 5 different nonprofits do business better. I've helped these 3 real estate deals go through faster than they ever could go through. It's important for us to all, as public servants, make sure that we understand that New York's not in competition just with other states. We're in competition with the world. And that's why it's important for us to be cognizant of that and to help the good guys of the businesses and the nonprofits that are all over our state. And finally, and then I'm going to talk a little more about the matter that's got sort of got the public buzz right now in more detail before I turn it over to my team. It's very important to us that in all our affirmative work, we adhere to the principle and pursue the idea of equal justice under law. And thank you. Now, we're trying to run the office as efficiently and as effectively as possible. We're making sure that we help the good guys as well as the bad guys. But the essence of our work, and I came to understand this when I was campaigning around the state in 2010, and as I continue to travel around the state, a lot of people in the United States have lost confidence that we do have equal justice under law in this country. And I say that as a real believer in the American justice system. But you have to have that confidence, you have to have that sense. And when the president, as noted by your great senator, set up this national working group, unprecedented state and federal working group to investigate the conduct that blew up the economy in 2008, he introduced me and the working group with a very simple statement. What we want to ensure is that everyone gets a fair shot, everyone pays their fair share, and that there's one set of rules for everyone. And that statement that we've used before and that the president adopted in the State of the Union address last year really tells you the core principle for our office. We don't guarantee success, but everyone deserves a fair shot. That's why places like LaGuardia are so important. We are not expecting anyone to carry us on their backs, but everyone has to pay their fair share. You know, when you have very, very wealthy people paying a much smaller share of their income and taxes than poor people, you got to take a close look at that as a problem. And finally, there's got to be one set of rules for everyone. And those are the principles that we've been trying to live by. And I can tell you that since I took office, we've made a lot of innovations. We've created some new bureaus. We've changed the structure somewhat to really reflect our commitment to these goals in a very daring move. I hired someone who's actually trained in management for the first time in the history of the Attorney General's office, because I know from my career in the private sector what it was like when we had management committees with the lawyers saying we could run the office even though we were never trained in management. The folks in the private sector, and we brought in a real expert in management, we've completely reorganized the office. And now as we proceed more efficiently, more effectively, and we've been able to do a lot. And my bureau chiefs are going to talk to you, my division heads are going to talk to you about some of that. But I want to emphasize, before I'm going to spend a few minutes on the issue with the banks, because that is recent news, and it's important to understand what that means for us, for the country, and what it particularly means for New York. The one thing I enjoy more than anything else is doing something no one has ever done before. And, you know, when I get on something, my colleagues will tell you, I'm a very stubborn guy. The most outstanding quality is really not creativity or intelligence, it's just incredible stubbornness. And I think that if you want to get something done, the fact that it's never been done before deters a lot of people. To me, that's an inspiration. So we have done what no one has ever done before with the gun shows in the state of New York. We have the only state where you can't get out of a gun show without a background check, and that was done by my office. We set up, thank you. And actually, Gabby Giffords and Mark Kelly came to one of our gun shows to call attention to the fact that we have the best gun show procedures in the country. We set up, the first time anyone ever did this in the country, a real-time prescription tracking system so we can track opioid painkillers that are causing so much harm, overprescribing of drugs. We're the first state to do that, and that was done by our office. And then when we discovered that the fastest growing crime in the country was theft of smartphones and assaults related to smartphones, which is now a third of the robberies in the United States, I was the first Attorney General, first public official to actually call in the manufacturers. We've now got a Secure Our Smartphones Coalition with over 100 government actors. 2 weeks ago, 31 attorneys general wrote to the manufacturers to implore them that you can't have a product that's this easy to steal, this easy to clean and make like a brand new phone, and this easy to resell. we insisted that they do what they've done with credit cards, which is install a kill switch. You can cancel it if it's stolen. They were very reticent about doing that, and we wondered why until we found out they were making $30 billion a year replacing lost and stolen smartphones. So we've taken this cause on. Apple, to its credit, has already, since we started, installed an activation lock. They've got to go further, make it an opt-out rather than an opt-in. But that's something no one has ever done before, and I'm happy to take it on. I love being creative. I love challenges. And you'll see in some of the stuff that my colleagues are going to talk to you about, we do that. Certainly the largest challenge I've taken on since I've been Attorney General has to do with the task force that the President put me as the chair of. And it's a very unusual story. So the net result is that as of the week before last, we settled the largest deal in American history, and I got over $1 billion for the people of the state of New York as a part of that deal. Now, the backstory, again, comes back to my inability to sort of give up on things even when I'm fighting with people bigger than myself, which is also something I tend to do. So I got elected Attorney General and was told that the one thing I didn't have to worry about was the collapse of the housing market and the mortgage crisis, because I took office in January 2011. There were hundreds of thousands of families across New York, a lot in Queens, facing foreclosures, and that was supposedly being settled by a group of all the other attorneys general and the Federal Justice Department and Housing and Urban Development Departments. So I thought, that's good, I have a lot to worry about. But then when I found out what the deal was they were proposing, which was essentially to get some relief for foreclosure abuses, they had collected some evidence about robo-signing and other things that happened. They were proposing, and the banks were demanding, as I would have if I was a bank lawyer, which I used to be, a general release, which meant there would never be an investigation into the actual conduct that blew up the economy, where they were putting all these bad mortgages into mortgage-backed securities and selling them to pension funds all over the world. So I decided that even though the president and all of the rest of these AGs thought it was a good idea, that I wasn't going to participate because I thought it was not a good enough deal. And remarkably enough, 6 months later, in November of 2011, I got a call from the HUD secretary after we've been fighting and yelling at each other and stuff for 6 months. The low point from their point of view, which they're trying to organize around me, so they called Eliot Spitzer to ask him if he could calm me down. Now, Eliot immediately called me, very excited, because no one had ever asked him to calm anyone else down. And of course, he agreed with me. It was very hard to find someone. They were calling people who all thought we should be tougher on the bank. So we managed to get them turned around, and then the president, a few months later, set up this unprecedented working group, including the Justice Department, the IRS, HUD, and other federal agencies, co-chaired by me, the first time a state attorney general's ever done this. And then it was a process of getting it staffed up and getting investigations going. And I filed several lawsuits. Other agencies have filed cases. The first bank that we got to the table in a big way was JPMorgan Chase, and the settlement 2 weeks ago, again, largest settlement in American history, $9 billion in cash, $4 billion in relief for homeowners, mortgage principal reductions and other things. I secured 10% of that at least for New York homeowners, and 600 some million of the cash. So we will be working with your leaders in government and with your great network of nonprofits, because what I've done with the money we've received from settlements so far is to build from the bottom up. I think you have to be able to help people where they are. When I took office, there were 340-some New York families, 340,000 families facing foreclosure. None of them really had regular counsel. More than half of them never got to talk to a lawyer at any point in the process. So I believe that having right to a lawyer is the right that protects all your other rights. So we set out to fund a network of housing counselors and legal services, and now we fund through this settlement, banks are paying for this, over 90 agencies, including here in Queens. No New Yorker ever has to go into a bank to renegotiate their loan without a lawyer or a housing counselor, and I'm going to expand that with the funds we've gotten. And we are also looking forward to getting more relief, funding land banks, really helping to revive communities that have been harmed. And as a special bonus at the end of the day, when everyone was tired in the middle of the night, I got them to stick in a special provision. So for areas that FEMA was addressing between October 2012 and today, and I think you can figure out what FEMA area we're talking about, there's an even better deal. So people who were victims of having mortgage problems and being hit by Hurricane Sandy the bank's going to waive all their fees and costs for those particular people. So we're bringing extra relief to Queens and extra relief to New York. So the principles and the goals are set. We have a great team of people doing the work. And the last point I want to make is I am not foolish enough to believe that any of this is about me. No one does anything by themselves. Actually, the last Rosh Hashanah, my rabbi spoke of a great problem in America today, which is the self-made man that worships his creator. Not God, the self-made man that worships himself. And I've encountered some of them in my litigation experiences, and I'm not going to talk about Donald Trump tonight, but it's pretty remarkable. But I believe that I get things done by working with people. There's a very, very strong sense in my office, and that I try to convey to everyone, we're all in this together. We have economic troubles, we have issues all over the United States. Oh, tiempo ecuadoriano, Francisco Moya. Assemblies. Thank you. But we all do this together, and your colleagues are among the best people I've worked in across the entire state. I look forward to working with you on getting us out of this mess in the housing market, out of helping the people who were devastated by Hurricane Sandy and who are still hurting. I'm looking forward to you helping us to reform parts of our government that need fixing, and to helping in areas that you're going to hear about tonight, about health care, about the environment, about civil rights. And so with that, I want to welcome you to the forum. Tonight is not about me. It's about the folks who work for me, getting to know you, and us establishing the contacts in the community that enable us to be more responsive and to do a better job for all of you. I do better when we all do better. And with that, I want to turn it over to an extraordinary lawyer who is the head of my social justice division and is going to tell you a little bit more about our work. Alvin Bragg.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Attorney General. I was drawn to come work for the Attorney General's office because of his commitment to equal justice under law, which he just talked about for a moment. And I'm proud to serve under his leadership and work on the type of issues we're going to talk about tonight. So it's my honor to introduce my colleagues. The Attorney General talked about the great team. As I was preparing, these are people I work with every day, and I know their backgrounds, but as I was preparing to introduce them, I realized just how phenomenal they are. So in a moment, I'm going to introduce them, but let me just give you a very brief overview of the Social Justice Division. There's 6 bureaus in it, and you'll hear from 4 of the bureau chiefs tonight, which are seated before you, and the Attorney General went over it with you, and that's civil rights, health care, environmental protection, and I lost my place, I apologize, and Labor Bureau. That's why I lost my place, because she's not seated there. We'll be joined momentarily by our Labor Bureau chief. So those 4 bureaus you'll hear from tonight. In addition, there are 2 other bureaus in the Social Justice Division, and they are the Charities Bureau, which, as the Attorney General mentioned, has oversight over the not-for-profits in the state, and the Tobacco Compliance Bureau, which oversees a landmark settlement with, between various states and big tobacco manufacturers that arose from targeted advertising towards minors. So you'll hear from those 4 bureau chiefs in the Social Justice Division. But before that, you'll hear from Mr. Mayor, Marty Mack, who oversees the Attorney General's 13 regional offices, including the Brooklyn Queens office, which is your regional office. And to just tell you a little bit about Marty Mack's background, you've heard a little bit of it. He served as a senior advisor to 2 governors. He served under Attorney General Eliot Spitzer, overseeing the regional offices at that time. And then, as you heard most poignantly earlier tonight, he was the mayor, a mayor of Cortland, New York, earlier in his career. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Mayor Marty Mack.
Thank you, Alvin. Thank you. Just for a point of location, too, the Attorney General asked me to speak about consumer protection, consumer affairs tonight, and what we do in that field. But for the Folks in Brooklyn and Queens, if you have a consumer issue, you can of course always call 120 Broadway, which is our central office, but we also have an office in the state office building down near the Barclays Arena, near the Williamsburg Bank Building. So that's always available as well. And consumer protection is an incredibly important part of Attorney General Schneiderman's mission. The consumer movement is about 50 years old in this country. It's a relatively newborn in the scheme of what government plays a role in. And we all know about Ralph Nader, perhaps, and his book on Safe at Any Speed. And he certainly gets a lot of credit for sparking government to get involved. But it was actually 50 years ago when President Kennedy declared a Consumer Bill of Rights. And that was the first time the federal government stepped into the arena and took as its mandate responsibility for protecting consumers in the consumer marketplace. As he said at the time, we're all consumers. We all spend a large portion of our incomes in the consumer marketplace. And unfortunately, there are predators out there. And they want to transfer dollars in your pocket into their pockets. And to do it too often in a manner that is unfair to the consumer. When Kennedy declared his Consumer Bill of Rights, he said that every consumer has a right to be safe, a right to be informed, a right to choose, and a right to be heard. And those are the central elements that have shaped all consumer legislation since that time. If you look back over the past year with Hurricane Sandy, it was the consumer legislation that was enacted in New York that protected against price gouging. Mostly gas stations, but some food stores and some hotels. Holiday Inn Express, not far from here, was gouging those who needed a place to stay, who lost their home because of the storm. And we settled with them and were able to reimburse 40 of those consumers who stayed there and got them restitution. Many of the others were gas stations, but 45 cases we settled on behalf of consumers, and we're still looking at those. We're still looking through those complaints that we received at the time. Another local example of consumer protection is a local car dealership, a large car dealership in Brooklyn, Dufresne. And it seemed that too often consumers made a deal, and then when they got their bill, somehow the price had been inflated as to what they were paying for their car. We were able to obtain $500,000 in restitution for the consumers. We deal with simple things, but what irritate and affect the consumer on a day-to-day basis. A store price chopper, which is big more north of the city, but what they were doing is advertising and aggressively advertising double-year coupons, all right? So people take their coupon into the store, they get to the register, and a dollar coupon, they expected $2 off, and no. What they were told at the register, there was a cap. And they were misrepresenting what their double coupon was. And they were luring people into the store. And it was unfair. It violated the right to be informed. And so we signed a deal with Price Chopper to ensure that that would never happen again. There is a store called Michael's, a craft store, that sells all over the state. It's really a big national company. And they were having sales. Unfortunately, it was an endless sale. Something that is on sale every day is never a sale. And so they violated the standards and their language for declaring there was a sale when there was not. And so they settled with us and agreed not to do it again and paid about $2 million. We also had a case up in the North Country near Fort Drum where soldiers were lured into a sale. Specifically, they went after soldiers and sold goods that were of very low quality at a very high price at usurious rates. And these soldiers then would be overseas, and when they were sued for not paying what they could not afford, they would default. And this company then would collect on them while they're over in Afghanistan and over in Iraq and not paying any attention to the soldiers' rights, not only when they made the deal, but while they were serving. And we were able to stop that activity, void the judgments, and get the soldiers their money back. The important thing is that the Attorney General views our mission as to be there when consumer needs our help, when we can help protect them and to help save them dollars, scarce dollars too often when they're buying goods in the consumer marketplace. So what we need is your assistance to let us know where we can be of help to you, to let us know of those stores who aren't honoring what 50 years ago was declared to be the Consumer Bill of Rights. And under New York law, we have very strong powers to enforce the rights of consumers. So we will hope that you keep us informed so we can help you. Thank you.
I want to introduce Kristen Clark next, but before I do that, on your way in, you got a sort of an agenda for the night, and inside of it is a comment card. So as the Attorney General said, this is our chance to get to know you and to hear from you. So we'll talk for a while, but we hope at the end of the program to hear from you. So if you have a moment and you have a question, jot it down, and there will be people collecting the comment forms for the question and answer period that will follow. Next, we'll hear from Kristen Clark, who's the chief of the Civil Rights Bureau. She joined the Attorney General's office from the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, where she oversaw LDF's voter education work. Before LDF, she was at the United States Department of Justice working on hate crime cases, police misconduct, and human trafficking. So next we'll hear from Kristen.
Good evening. The Civil Rights Bureau is deeply committed to advancing the cause of civil rights and fighting inequality. We're the part of the office that works to combat ongoing discrimination across the state, and we use every tool in our arsenal to ensure equal access, equal justice, and equal opportunity for all. Our Bureau handles cases that range from employment and housing discrimination matters, education and criminal justice issues. We work to promote disability access, access to the ballot box, and language access for persons who may be limited English proficient. We work to ensure that banks are complying with fair lending laws. We work to promote LGBT justice, among many things. Before I give you a very brief overview of some of the areas that we have worked on very recently, I wanted to take a moment to just note that this year marks the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington, as many of you all know, and next year marks the 60th anniversary of the Supreme Court's ruling in Brown versus Board of Education, the 50th anniversary of our federal Civil Rights Act. I think this provides an interesting moment to take a step back and reflect on the great progress that we have made with respect to civil rights over the past few decades, but also to focus on the continuing work that remains to be done to ensure that we fully achieve the goal of equality in our state. Some of the issues that we have touched on very briefly in the Civil Rights Bureau includes working to combat barriers faced by persons with criminal convictions. We recently resolved a case involving a Fortune 500 company, Quest Diagnostics, for automatically disqualifying job candidates just because they have a criminal conviction. We also worked to reverse a law adopted by a town that prevented persons with criminal convictions from serving as taxi drivers. We believe that once you serve your time, you deserve a second chance, and reintegration. And reintegration into the job market is certainly one proven way to prevent recidivism. We've been working very aggressively to promote LGBT justice and secure agreements with the National Football League and Major League Baseball to help ensure that no recruit or player faces discrimination based on their sexual orientation by strengthening protections that apply in the recruitment process, among other things. We've worked to promote disability access in a number of areas and have obtained agreements that ensure that retailers such as Loehmann's and JCPenney, theaters, bus companies, landlords, boards of elections are all providing equal access to persons with disability. We've been working to ensure access to the ballot box. We ran an election day hotline during the primary and general election cycles and are deeply committed to making sure that every eligible voter in New York City and across the state is able to cast their ballot. Finally, there is no shortage of incredibly important civil rights cases that has gone before the Supreme Court last term and this term. And in all of these cases, the Attorney General has led the charge in filing multi-state, bipartisan briefs on behalf of states on the right side of these issues. These are cases that involve challenges to the Voting Rights Act, cases involving diversity in colleges and universities, marriage equality, the Fair Housing Act, and just last week, we led the charge in filing a brief involving access to reproductive health clinics. So in all of these cases, the Attorney General is leading the charge to make sure that we don't turn the clock back. I'll close by making a brief reference to a report that the Attorney General's office issued just a few weeks ago regarding the NYPD's, New York City Police Department, Stop and Frisk program. We decided to take an objective look at the Stop and Frisk program and endeavor to answer a question that had not been answered previously. What happens to the 6% of stops that result from the millions of stops, the 6% of arrests that result from the millions of stops that are conducted in our city? We looked closely at these arrests and tracked them through their final disposition and noted a number of observations. Of the 6% of stops that result in arrests, close to half of them result in no convictions, meaning they're voided at police precincts, dismissed by prosecutors, or result in what's called an ACD, an adjournment in contemplation of a dismissal, which is the equivalent of a dismissal. We noted that almost 1 in 4 arrests were dismissed prior to arraignment. We took note of the collateral consequences of many of these arrests, which have impacts that are felt in the employment and housing and educational context. And we noted that as the number of stops increased in the city, there was also an uptick in litigation costs faced by the city. We have a report that provides far more extensive detail and analysis that I won't go into this evening. You can find it on our website. But we encourage you to be in touch with us. Bring complaints of discrimination to us. When you hear of them, we are committed to rolling up our sleeves and fighting to ensure equal treatment and equality for all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. I want to remind you again to, if you have a question, please fill them out on the comment card, and a little while later, folks will be coming around from the Attorney General's office to pick them up. It's now my pleasure to introduce Lisa Landau, who is the chief of our Healthcare Bureau. She joined the Attorney General's office from the New York City Health Department, where she ran an anti-poverty program that paired registered nurses with first-time low-income mothers. Prior to that, she was previously at the Attorney General's office, and during that stint, she was the director of the Attorney General's office's Reproductive Rights Project. Lisa?
Thank you, Alvin. I'm very happy to be here tonight to tell you a little bit about what our Healthcare Bureau does. So the Bureau investigates and brings enforcement actions against actors in the health arena, including health plans, healthcare providers, drug companies, healthcare lenders, and others that engage in fraudulent, misleading, deceptive, or illegal practices in the healthcare market. In addition to having a group of lawyers who work on investigations and enforcement actions, we also have a group of non-lawyer advocates who staff a hotline and resolve individual consumer complaints. And the number is behind me, I believe. There it is. In 2011 and 2012 alone, our helpline fielded 10,000 calls, resolving about 7,000 individual cases, which resulted in over $6 million in the pockets of consumers through refunds or canceled debt. And these dollars don't even include how many instances in which care that the health plan was denying as not medically necessary was overturned. Our helpline calls often tips us off to something more systemic going on, particularly when we see a pattern of complaints. So what kinds of cases does the Healthcare Bureau pursue? We've brought and successfully resolved cases against insurance plans for improper claims denials, for using the wrong reimbursement methodology, for providing inaccurate provider directories, to name just a few. This past summer, we announced an agreement with Empire Blue Cross to implement a hardship exception for consumers who find it very difficult to get their prescriptions through mail order specialty pharmacies. And as a result of our advocacy, other plans have stepped up to the plate. Just about 2 weeks ago, we settled an investigation against a fraudulent kidney donor search firm that was tricking people into paying thousands of dollars for kidney searches that just didn't happen. I'd like to briefly mention a few of the Healthcare Bureau's current concerns and themes. First, we're focused on medical debt, which is the reason for about 60% of all bankruptcies. In particular, we're looking at medical debt that results from consumer fraud. For example, last summer we settled a case with GE, which makes a healthcare credit card called Care Credit, a card that after a certain promotional period carries an interest rate of almost 27%, which many consumers did not understand. Our settlement puts into place a set of new protections for consumers, including a cooling off period, new disclosures for consumers, and limitations on prepayment. And we recently issued a set of warnings to consumers about medical credit cards. We're also looking at other arguably predatory actors, healthcare lenders, as well as healthcare providers that promote high-interest loans to unwary consumers who are vulnerable because they want and need treatment and don't have insurance to cover the costs. And it's clear that medical costs are obvious drivers of medical debt. Certainly, we remain hopeful that the Affordable Care Act will play a role in making sure that New Yorkers will have affordable options for health plans. And while our office may not be able to control prices, we can help to ensure that health plan disclosures are clear so that consumers understand their policies and what their policies pay for and what they don't. We're also looking at disclosures of providers, including hospitals and physicians, to ensure that they are not misleading and that they provide the transparency needed for consumers to make the right choices for themselves and their families. Another important area I'll mention briefly is public health. The Healthcare Bureau is concerned when an illegal practice may result in harming people, not solely to their pocketbook, but when the practice harms health. Some examples include a settlement with a health plan that wasn't covering blood lead tests for kids, and another against Walgreens for misleading consumers about flu shots being covered by certain plans when they weren't covered if the shot was given in the pharmacy. One area that we're particularly concerned about is health plan coverage for mental health treatment in light of existing but relatively new federal and state laws requiring mental health parity. We're finding that health plan implementation of these laws is slow in many instances and have received at least 150 complaints concerning mental health coverage issues. So we've reason to be thinking more about how we address the issue in a systemic way. And finally, with respect to the Affordable Care Act, we're keeping an eye out for websites that might try to trick consumers into thinking that the site is an official part of the New York State Health Exchange, as well as companies that hold themselves out as new health plans on the New York State Health Exchange that may not really be approved plans for the exchange. And on the topic of the Affordable Care Act, the Healthcare Bureau has been active in 3 particular areas. We've ensured that providers of preventive care are not charging copays, for example, for colonoscopies, for mammograms. We've ensured that consumers know that plans must now cover adult dependents under age 26, and that plans are notifying members that they can continue covering dependents in New York State through age 29. And we've ensured that plans are covering support for breastfeeding, including breast pumps and lactation counseling. So the bottom line is that we're watching out for consumers, whether it's a fraudulent business or practice or it's hiding the ball in some way. We're here to level the playing field and to achieve equity and justice on behalf of New Yorkers across the state. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. I know I'm going to sound like a broken record, but you see folks in the aisles with the comment cards for your questions, and we really encourage you to fill them out because we're here to not only speak, but to hear from you. Let me now introduce Lim Shrolovic, who is the chief of our Environmental Protection Bureau. Lim has spent a career on these issues. Previously, he was a section chief in charge of the affirmative work in the Bureau, focusing on issues such as imposing limits on engine idling by diesel trucks and buses. And other than his government service, he also, when he was in private practice, brought lawsuits on behalf of people who were harmed by toxins and other chemicals. So now let us welcome Lem.
Thank you, Alvin, and thank you all. The guiding principle of Attorney General Schneiderman's Environmental Protection Bureau is that every New Yorker has the right to clean and healthy air to breathe, water to drink and to recreate on, and communities in which to live and raise their families. The Bureau enforces, defends, and protects these rights for all New Yorkers. Attorney General Schneiderman's Environmental Protection Bureau is a great team of about 40 attorneys, scientists, and policy analysts. We are active in all levels of state and federal courts, enforcing and defending state and federal environmental laws that are in place to protect the public health, safety, and welfare of our citizens, and to protect our amazingly rich and diverse natural places and resources like our coastal waters, lands, and parks. I'd like to give you just 3 quick examples of Attorney General Schneiderman's environmental work. First, in fighting for New Yorkers' right to breathe clean air, Attorney General Schneiderman led a coalition of 11 states in a court action to require the Federal Environmental Protection Agency to strengthen our national ambient air quality standard for soot, which is also known as fine particulate matter, but it's the black crud that collects on all our windowsills. This tough new standard resulting from that court action will reduce human exposure to those tiny particles that trigger asthma attacks, decrease lung function, and are particularly harmful to our kids and seniors. And this category of air pollutants also was recently classified as a human carcinogen by the International Agency for Research on Cancer, which is the specialized cancer agency of the World Health Organization. Second, to protect our communities and environment from the threats posed by climate change, Attorney General Schneiderman is defending New York State's participation in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative in a legal challenge that was brought by outside political interests. The Greenhouse Gas Initiative is demonstrating every day that reasonable action to cut greenhouse gas emissions can be taken now with several positive effects. First, air pollutants that both injure human health and warm the planet are reduced. Second, the Greenhouse Gas Initiative has helped New York raise more than $320 million to fund energy efficiency and alternative energy investments that can lower energy costs now for consumers and pay economic and environmental dividends well into the future. Third, to protect the health and safety of our communities and metropolitan areas that host nuclear power plants, last year Attorney General Schneiderman won a landmark victory in a lawsuit against the Federal Nuclear Regulatory Commission that for the first time requires the commission to fully examine the public health, safety, and environmental hazards and consequences of long-term on-site storage of nuclear waste at the nuclear power plants here in New York and around the country. Hopefully these quick examples give you a sense of our work on behalf of New Yorkers' health and our environment, and we very much welcome your thoughts and ideas for further action in these vitally important areas. Thank you.
Thanks, Slim. We will hear from one more speaker before our question and answer period. We've been joined by Terry Gerstein, who is the chief of the Labor Bureau. She's spent her career working on issues for low-wage workers and other issues that affect the workforce. She joined the Attorney General's office from the New York State Department of Law, where she was a deputy commissioner, and earlier in her career, she was an assistant attorney general in the Attorney General's office. Terry?
Thank you. Thank you, Elvin. So there's a lot about the minimum wage in the news these days. Should the minimum wage be increased? Is it enough to live on? What we do in the Labor Bureau is we enforce the state's minimum wage laws, as well as other essential legal protections, so that these laws are a reality in the lives of the most vulnerable New York workers. We focus in the Labor Bureau on some of the most critical protections that exist for workers. The minimum wage, overtime laws, wage payment laws, and also what I see as one of the most important laws of all, the law that protects workers' rights to report violations to the government, because when workers see something that is wrong, they need to be able to report it to the government. We also sometimes prosecute employers who don't buy workers' compensation insurance for all of their employees, or who underreport employees for their unemployment insurance taxes. Most of our cases involve workers who aren't getting the right amount of wages in a variety of different types of low-wage workplaces. We've looked into restaurants, construction sites, car washes, nail salons, a whole range of very low-wage workplaces. The cases usually involve workers earning very low wages, often immigrant workers. In the Labor Bureau, we bring cases not only civilly, but also criminally. And over the past few years, we've been increasing criminal enforcement of the labor laws in certain circumstances. Specifically, in instances where there's a repeat violator who previously violated the labor law in some way and still continues after some kind of other government enforcement, or an employer who has false records, or who just completely fails to pay workers for a chunk of time, fails to pay any wages at all. When we choose our cases, we choose them strategically to try to have a broader impact on either an industry or a community of employers. So we want not only to change the behavior of the particular employer we're investigating, but also to change behavior more broadly and bring about greater legal compliance. I think the best way to give a sense of the work we've been doing is to talk about some of our cases in the past couple of years. On the criminal side, we've had some cases involving total non-payment of wages. We had a case, Bright Star, involving a home health aid agency that for 2 or 3 months just didn't pay home health aides any wages at all, as it continued to hire new people. And so that was a case that we brought criminally, and that employer ended up pleading guilty to the misdemeanor of failure to pay wages and paying full restitution. We recently announced a criminal plea here in Queens of the Quorum Construction Group, which again was it was a construction company. In this case, the workers were Chinese immigrants, again, just completely not paid wages for a period of time. We have another case which is ongoing, in which a cleaning contractor at a movie theater was arrested over the summer. He'd been investigated, the contractor had been investigated by the U.S. Department of Labor, had signed a settlement agreement and paid money, was required to pay money back to the workers for not paying them overtime, paid the money to the workers, and then demanded the money back and continued to commit exactly the same kinds of violations. So that was an instance where we felt that there had already been civil enforcement, and it was really, in order to protect these very vulnerable low-wage workers' rights, it was necessary to take stronger action. And we often have criminal cases also in the prevailing wage context. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, there's a law that requires higher wages to be paid when public buildings are built, the prevailing wage, and there's public money involved in those contracts, and so often prevailing wage contractors, we find violations in that they're not paying the required prevailing wage. On the civil side, to give you an example of how we tried to focus on particular industries, we had several investigations of moving companies that were not sufficiently paying their employees because they would pay them based on the job, 2 rooms in an apartment, something like that, but they didn't actually pay them by the hour. So when you did the math, it turned out that people really weren't getting, some of them weren't getting minimum wage, many weren't getting overtime,
And in fact, as we began investigating several companies, we learned that this was an industry practice throughout many moving companies. And so what we did, we settled a couple of cases, one for $1.2 million, another one for almost $500,000, a third one with a smaller company for a more modest sum. But then we reached out and we sent letters to every single moving company registered in the state of New York, informing them not only about these settlements, but also about what their obligations are under the labor law. We conducted some seminars for moving companies, and we've also been in touch with the associations, the moving company associations, and are having articles about labor law in their monthly newsletters. So that's an example of how we're trying to use our enforcement not only to impact those employers that we're investigating, but also to have a broader impact on the industry. We've been looking at a number of car washes, which often have very high rates of labor law violations, some construction of buildings that are financed, developments that are developed as affordable housing. There have been a number of violations, and we've gotten a lot of complaints and have been very, very actively looking into labor issues among fast food restaurants. So in closing, I'd like to say that we work in the Labor Bureau in particular, and in the Attorney General's office as a more general matter. We work very, very closely with community-based organizations and advocacy groups. Within the Labor Bureau, we also work closely with unions, sometimes with trade associations. We know that a lot of times very low-wage workers might be reluctant or fearful to come and speak with us directly, but community organizations who are right there on the ground know what's happening on the ground in workplaces, in your communities, and so we really rely on organizations to serve as a bridge and help us reach these communities that we are so devoted to serving and to protecting the rights. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Terry. Now we'll move on to the question and answer portion, which is very important to us because we get to be directly responsive to matters of concern to you. And fittingly, the first question is for the Attorney General himself. It is, while murders are down across the city, the issue of gun violence persists. What is the AG's office doing to address the issue of illegal guns?
Thank you. Good question. I have been involved in work against gun violence for a long time. Before I was in the state Senate, when I was in the state Senate, I was actually the national co-chair of Legislators Against Illegal Guns, which worked with the mayors against illegal guns. I've had a challenging history on the issue, and to be candid, I think it's important for us to recognize how badly we've been out-organized by the folks on the other side of this issue over the last 20 or 30 years. When my first term in the New York State Senate, I had one of the gun websites have my name on it with a sniper scope going up and down over my name so you could blow my name up, which I thought was particularly tasteful. But we managed to actually, through all this fighting, I managed to maintain a good working relationship with the folks on the other side. And because of that, I just never lied to them. And I was able to, when I became Attorney General, we implemented a couple of very important programs. One of the things we did was we have an organized crime task force that had been doing traditional drug gangs and things like that for a long time. There are two areas I wanted to move it into that we have moved into now. One is human trafficking, which is of great concern to us, and the other was gun trafficking. And we sent undercover agents into gun shows all around the state. As I've mentioned earlier, that we came to a good conclusion on this, but it didn't start out so well. We discovered that it didn't matter what story you told gun sellers, they would sell you a gun. We instructed our undercover specifically to tell stories that made it clear they could not possibly pass a background check. One of our undercovers told the sellers, I don't have any guns because my wife got an order of protection against me and the cops took all my guns and I'm really mad at her, and they sold him a gun. So we busted the people who did the illegal sales, but then instead of just pursuing the gun show operators for what would have been misdemeanors, we sat down with a group of them, and they actually sat with me and people in my office And we worked out a set of model procedures that they knew would be easy to comply with. And the 6 shows we busted signed up for the Model AG procedures. We sealed the perimeter of the gun shows. They hire off-duty cops, and this is all agreed to. We tag every gun going in. We printed up a set of tags so you know who brought it in. If you try and leave with a gun you didn't bring in, you can't get out unless you have a receipt showing a background check. So what they were unable to accomplish in Washington, we were actually able to accomplish in New York. And in addition to the 6 shows, thank you. In addition to the 6 shows we busted, one after another, every other major gun show signed voluntarily up to do this. The rank and file of the NRA want background checks. They want safe storage of guns. They're willing to give up on some of these high-capacity weapons. The next stage of this movement is really prying the reasonable people away from the extremists. And I'm very proud of the fact that I'm working very closely with Gabby Gifford and Mark Kelly on this. I've spoken at events for them. They've been to events for me. And I think they are gun owners. I mean, they have 8 guns, and they have a way of breaking this off. I mean, you go to a regular gun show. I go to gun shows now around New York State, and these guys really like me because I'm sort of like, they've never actually seen a liberal, so they get excited about it and, want to touch me and stuff. And so, we go to these shows, and Mark can just talk to them about, he has a Colt 45, what's this Colt 45? And we have a way of breaking through, and Gabby's presence is extraordinary, and I do think that the next phase of this movement involves prying the overwhelming majority of gun owners who are good, decent people, parents and grandparents, who don't want kids to get hurt, who want background checks, away from the extremist element. And that requires a lot of work on our part because it's not less a sense of disagreement about some specific gun issues and more of a sense of a cultural divide that has been created where they think those of us in big cities sort of look down on them. And honestly, I have to say for some of the folks that I deal with on my side of the issue, it's sort of true. You got to treat people with respect. You got to listen to them, and then you'll be surprised at who's willing to work with you. So we've done a lot in that area. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney General. The second question relates to health care, so I'll address it to Lisa. It is, how important is it that the United States government health care website is not totally functional yet?
Yeah, so we know that it hasn't been a smashing success in Washington with the website that the government has been trying to fine-tune. So as that continues to get better, in New York State, we are one of the states that has its own website and its own health exchange. And so I can say, having spoken to contacts at the health exchange just recently, that New York State is doing quite well. The website is up, and of course it's had its problems as well, but it is available, and you can sign up on the website, and already there have been upward of 77,000 New Yorkers who've actually gotten coverage thus far, and about 260,000 other New Yorkers who have been deemed eligible, and their applications are being processed. So I think that's really good news for us folk in New York State. So it's just to remind people that as much as we hear about what's happening in the federal exchange website, that we in New York State have our own health exchange, and that's really where you need to be looking to buy affordable plans here in New York State. It's the New York State of Health is what you'd be looking for.
So tell your friends if they want good gun safety laws and health care to move here.
This question is for Kristen. You mentioned a report that the Attorney General's office issued regarding the Stop and Frisk program. Doesn't Stop and Frisk lead to many convictions for crimes of violence and many convictions involving dangerous weapons?
Thank you. That's a great question. So as I mentioned, what we decided to do was to delve into the data in a way that people hadn't done before. We looked at 2.4 million stops conducted between 2009 and 2012 and focused on the 6% of them that resulted in arrest and then traced them through the criminal justice system to see what the outcomes were. And in direct response to that question, what we found was that fewer than just 1 in 50 arrests, so 0.1%, 0.1% of all the stops, just 1 in 50 of the arrests led to convictions for crimes of violence. And same thing with respect to crimes involving possession of a weapon. Just 1 in 50 arrests, or 0.1% of all stops, led to convictions involving possession of a dangerous weapon. So what we hope we've done with this report is contributed important, valuable new information to the ongoing dialogue that is now happening around effective law enforcement strategies that can help ensure we fight crime and protect public safety. But I think all of this merits consideration in the ongoing debate that's now happening about effective law enforcement strategies.
Thank you, Kristen. The next question is for Lem. During Hurricane Sandy, many parts of Queens were flooded. What can the Attorney General's office do to help protect the city from future megastorms?
Well, I think the focus has to be on two levels. First, it's vitally important that greenhouse gas emissions are limited to slow and mitigate the effect of sea level rise and climate change, which impacts us here. Now, the unusual thing from a pollution standpoint about greenhouse gas emissions is that emissions of those pollutants anywhere in America, or indeed anywhere in the world, has the same impact as emissions here in New York. And that creates certain challenges and also certain opportunities. So to tackle the largest sources of domestic U.S. Greenhouse gas emissions, Attorney General Schneiderman has led a group of states that are seeking to limit and control emissions, greenhouse gases from the electric power generating sector. That's the largest sector of those emissions here in this country. And also to limit the very significant emissions of methane from the oil and gas development sector, which are increasing very rapidly in this country. And thirdly, put in a set of comments that the environmental review of the Keystone XL pipeline, which is actually out in Canada, or stretches from North Dakota down to Texas, but it's moved, the purpose is to move Canadian petroleum to market, that the climate change impacts of that project be fully examined and considered in whether that project moves forward. Another area that's vitally important, I think, is that as we learned in Sandy here in New York City, keeping the electric power on during a storm and restoring it very quickly after the storm is really a very important aspect of safety for our communities. And so on that front, the Attorney General is advocating in an ongoing proceeding before our Public Service Commission involving Con Edison. And we're arguing in that proceeding that the Queens utility that provides our power and gas here in Queens and throughout New York City take into account the documented sea level rise that's already occurred and that's projected to continue to occur in the future, as well as increasingly unpredictable weather as it looks at and determines how best to harden its utility delivery infrastructure that provides us the power and gas that we need here in New York.
Thanks, Lem. So our time is running out, so we have one last question that we can do in this format. But I want to let everyone know, if you filled out a question, we will get back to you in some form, either by email or if you left other contact information, your question will be answered. So please know that. And secondly, while we'll adjourn after this question, the panelists will be here and other members of the Attorney General staff will be around to answer other questions tonight. The last question is for Terry. What effect does immigration status have on labor law enforcement?
That's a great question. Workers have the protection of New York's labor laws regardless of their immigration status. And in the Attorney General's office, we do not ask workers what their immigration status is when we conduct investigations, so we don't know what their immigration status is. If they've performed work, they have the right to be paid minimum wage and overtime and to the protections of New York's labor laws.
Succinct. I want to now, call the Attorney General back up to the podium to close us out for this formal part of the evening. So he'll make his way. I'll just say, as he does, that I hope you enjoyed hearing some of the work of the Social Justice Division and the regional offices, and you can see that when we were drawn to come to the office by the Attorney General under the call of equal justice under law, he's put us into action, and every day under his leadership we're working to make equal justice under the law a reality. Thank you, Mr. Attorney General.
Thank you, Alvin. Thank you all for coming here. Look, this is a challenging time. It's a challenging time in terms of our economy. Economic inequality has been growing very, very rapidly. There are a lot of people hurting. There are a lot of people who, frankly, have given up on the idea that there can and should be one set of rules for everyone. We don't give up. And we know that but we also know that the only way to get America back on its traditional path, which was a country that didn't start out realizing its ideals, but with every generation moved towards greater justice and greater equality. We've been off that track for the last 20 or 25 years. In our office, we believe that we can and must return to it. We also understand we cannot do it without all of you. We do better through coalitions. We rely on community organizations. We rely on businesses. We rely on colleges to work with us. We have great internship programs and great collaborative programs with a lot of agencies. If you can work with us, please do. If you have questions, please ask. And thank you, and I'd ask you to thank all of our bureau chiefs and the great staff from the office for coming tonight. Thank you.